Tune in this week, episode 80, Between Two Bridges. We're here with Ray Timmons, the realtor to the stars.
You're listening to Between Two Bridges, a business-to-business podcast. With your hosts, Joe Ferranti and Jerry Kenna. Produced by Nathan Kenna. Interviewing entrepreneurs, business operators, and investors. This episode is brought to you by Wash, because laundry shouldn't cost your time. Wash delivers. Sign up at pickupwashdeliver.com. Do the wash. Skip the hassle.
Between Two Bridges, episode 80. We're here with Ray Timmons, commercial real estate agent. You got a lot of titles here, I think.
Father-in-law.
Father-in-law. I didn't know if you were going to admit that on air or not. Yeah. We can edit that part out.
As long as Nate's got his finger on the button, we're good.
Beep. Yeah. So Ray's just for full disclosure, Ray is my father-in-law.
Right.
You dabble in commercial real estate. We talked a little bit about your interest in maybe.
Did you call it dabbling? I'm just curious.
And so you kind of showed some interest, and I kind of always wanted to have you on here.
Yeah.
So
No.
I thought you told me he was a professional golfer.
He is a professional golfer. Senior tour, waiting for his invite.
Yeah, they're waiting for me to come back. I still have a year eligibility in what do you call it? NCAA.
Yeah, there you go.
I have a year eligibility.
Yeah, with name, image, and liking, so it might be a good fit. You could get paid.
Of course I started in the steel business because my dad got into a relationship with a fellow here from the area, actually, that really was sort of a broker, and he would buy and sell equipment, and he befriended my father because my father was at Allegheny Ludlam Steel, and my dad was a buyer, what they called a buyer in those days. I never knew when I went to school, and all the kids, my dad's a plumber, my dad's a this, my dad's a buyer. It didn't even make sense. But what he did for Allegheny Ludlam was buy scrap. So bought the scrap, it was shipped by barge up to Allegheny Ludlam. But when you're a buyer, you're everybody's friend because they all want to shower you with gifts or give you things or whatever, like a $400 million plane, for example,
Nice.
It would be a nice gift.
Gesture.
But in my dad's case, it was generally, some stereo would show up at the house or, rotisserie thing or something like that. And this was all around Christmas time. And, when you're a little kid, you're sitting, oh my God, a package came to my front door.
The major award.
I thought it said Fragile right on it. And I was certain it was good. But anyway, but that's the kind of thing he did. And he met this fellow through this job because my dad they would call my dad and say, hey, come out here and look at this piece of junk equipment out here and tell us what and my dad just looked at it and said, what are you going to do with it? He said, we don't need it anymore. We're going to get rid of it. So you either throw it in the scrap pile or you try to market it somehow. And so my dad said, well, it's, worth some money. You ought to put it up for sale. And so that became his job. They had anything was a surplus asset, it would go to him as a report, have a short description on it, sometimes maybe a serial number, you didn't even know what it was. And he would go out and look at it and have to send this note, have to go all the way through every Allegheny Ludlam plant to make sure they didn't need it. And then he could put it up for sale.
And he personally would put it up for sale.
Well, not him, but he could sell it to a dealer or a broker,
okay.
A guy like that. And, so he would, I think what he did was made up a list. just mailed it out to anybody he knew in the area that might like equipment. And that's kind of how he got into business with a guy. The guy asked him, hey, why don't you come to business with me and we'll handle all of Allegheny Ludlam surplus equipment, forever. And so he did that, and they kept my dad doing that.
Yeah, because those
for
big
years.
companies, they're not like small companies. So they're done using it. Get rid of it. They got to put new, better equipment in, or.
Well, a lot of policies, the United States Steel policy was they never would sell anything surplus. They'd put it in the furnace, scrap it.
Really?
Never sold any surplus. And that was for years and years. And they didn't buy any used equipment either. Maybe motors, things that could be rebuilt, but they wouldn't go out and buy a used thing, a used mill.
So you got into that business for a while.
I started cleaning machinery when I was young with a wire brush and a steam cleaner, and then we would paint it. And it was actually across the street from the waterworks, which at the time was John F. Casey Company down there, a big fabricator, and I believe a road. Maybe they built roads and this sort of thing, highway work. At any rate, we had a yard.
Industrial painting
An
next
industrial
to the water
yard.
treatment plant.
Just about where the, what is the senior living place down there?
The
about
Muse.
where that's sitting is where we used to have steel mills lined up out there on pieces of railroad ties.
We see that over in Oakmont. Edgewater now has $1 million homes. They're not
Exactly.
allowed to have a basement, and they're not allowed to have a vegetable garden, but they can build a $1.3 million home. And a little known fact, I heard rumor on the street that Paul Skeens is actually, you heard it here first, Paul Skeens is looking at a place in Oakmont.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he won't be there long because he'll be traded probably by the end of the season. But
Yeah, it seems like
He'd be better off
unwise
to rent.
investment.
yeah.
Yeah, he might want to rent.
Yeah.
Might
but,
be looking New York, might be better.
But I thought that would be good for Oakmont to have him maybe walking the trail or
Yeah.
Livy done jogging in the morning.
And you see that, just in real estate in general, when you see towns like Oakmont, for example, where the railroad happened to be far enough away from the river that it gave all that riverfront. It's not quiet there, I can guarantee you that, because I lived in Aspinwall. And you can hear those trains going through there. But what a difference where Sharpsburg was right along the, almost right
Kissing the
right
river.
through the acreage there. And then
Oakmont's like a
Oakmont
significant
gives
distance
you
from the river.
really a significant difference, yeah. Blawnox is the same way because it goes and then it drops in the railroads that drop, and then they call it the bottoms down there because it's really difficult to maneuver trucks and whatnot.
Yeah, it
down
is.
there.
Sharpsburg's like that too, in and out. It's tough. I mean, with the manufacturing plant, like we need to make sure they come in off in a certain way, or else they're just going to get stuck. You do that enough times, the police chief's calling and bitching.
So you started in the steel business. Where did you go from there? How did you decide to start into commercial real estate?
Well, most of our competitors at the time was a company called Duquesne Electric down in in Tippins in Etna. Duquesne Electric was in Etna. And there were a few other companies around that were in the steel business, but they owned property either by inheriting or whatever, or they bought brownfield sites, sort of maybe not brown, but tan field sites. But in the day, back in the early 80s, you could buy, and even before that, you could buy, I think that whole R.J. Casey Industrial Park right on the river was purchased back in the 70s for $3 million. And that was the old Alice Chalmers plant that went all the way down to the jail, and that thing has just been sitting there minting money since then. So, that was the draw. It took us a while to get to that position where we said we could finally buy some buildings, and we wanted crane capacity because most of the stuff we were lifting was 10, 20, 50 tons, whatever. So we bought a place up in Elwood City, and there was a friendly banker up there that welcomed us to come in and really, helped us move in there. But even better, there was a local realtor, and this property was 200,000 square feet in one building, 50 in another building, 15 in this one, and 10 over here. And he the realtor pre-sold all the properties we didn't want. So when we went to close on the properties, the bank gave us money. It was a really strange situation because we made a deal, and we were going to borrow so much money from the bank, but when this other realtor sold these other properties, and it was like to the local people, the Elwood City Forge, they could use a building, and several different companies up there. So it worked out really well for us. And that's where it started. And then we moved in, and that property up there was owned by the Blawnox Corporation. And Blawnox, when we moved down there, people at Blawnox had called me and said, you bought Elwood City from us. Would you like to buy this Blawnox plant? Same issue. In that particular case, they had to, whatever the law is, when there's more than 100 people or 100 people or more, you've got to give fairly long notice or whatever it is. And we ended up buying the plant with all the equipment in it because they couldn't get the auction done. So we had the auction before we bought the property. We collected all the money and gave it to them, and we didn't owe them too much money. The auction of equipment.
Right place at right time.
Was a little embarrassing, but
is that what ended up getting you fired? Like getting your fire started with commercial real estate, like understanding that and getting involved?
The fact that you could buy for, even $10 a square foot and less at the time, buying for $10, crazy. And Blawnox down here, when we bought that, it was not only the buildings, it was the entire buildings all the way, which included all the way down and including the what is it, below the Sunoco station, or there's that other plant that comes down there that's we sold eventually to the owner of that. But
was this when Pittsburgh was starting to get out of the steel, or why was there so much space available?
Yeah, they were pretty much out, of the steel business. The local plants that were here, we're unionized, of course, and I don't blame them. They were lucky they were unionized because, the companies didn't spend a whole lot of money on capital improvements on these equipment they would buy in the 40s, and they would build it like a brick shit house, over-engineer it, and put it in with, you would go into a steel mill, it would be up there, that would be ground level. You would come downstairs, set of stairs, and they would have lights and a whole city of cables, grease things, all of this stuff that they installed for this. And Europeans never did that. They bought things to last for maybe 5 to 10 years, and then they knew technology would change enough that they could. But we were a little, I think, behind the eight ball. We built it like a brick shit house, but boy, we couldn't even resell it.
Right.
Nobody wanted to buy it because they said it cost me more money to put the foundations in or the cellar, the oil cellars in.
Yeah.
So,
the
anyway.
cement. Yeah, I mean, it's actually astronomical of how much cost of manufacturing changed, like the build stuff. Like wire is so expensive. You see like a service line now, 200 feet could be $12,000.
Yeah.
When we wired our plant, our 3-phase wire, it was like, I was like, we're going to run all new. We're going to do it right. We're going to run it to the front and to the back. And then we got a price on wire. And we were like, we're going to make a direct shot from that breaker box straight to the machine. Because it was like $12,000 in just wire. And the electrician was like, going to just buy extra to have it. And then he called me and he was like, we need to measure this all out. We're getting pre-cut. We're not buying 2 rolls like I thought. And I was like, thanks, because I would have been like floored. So
I was going to ask Jerry, did you lose power out here, Jerry?
Yeah, I was out here my office was out for just about 24 hours.
Oh, that's not bad.
Not too bad. No, we were pretty fortunate here, and my internet was, I don't know if it was out. It wasn't out any longer than my power was, so we were able to be back to work the next day, pretty much. We were out all of Wednesday. I closed down Wednesday. I came back to work Thursday. So.
Well, just to move my story. My story's longer than I'm 71 years old, and graduate of Blessed Sacrament in Penn Hills, 8 years of Catholic school.
He went to school with a local celebrity, Danny Smith, the bubblegum chewing special teams coach.
No, I didn't go to school with him.
Oh, you played football?
I played in the All-Star game, or I did play in the All-Star game with him, but I played in the against St. Bede's. He went to St. Bede's in Greenfield, I think it was, or wherever that was down there. And I intercepted this was 8th grade, so I was at least 14. And probably prepubescent. But any rate,
you intercepted
my
a
dad
pass
used
off
to
of
take films of all of my games. God help him. He used to take movies. And I thought, I have no idea where they were. He had them put on like a 8-track or whatever one year, but I thought it would have been funny if I was able to find that little clip
and send it into him.
Send it down to
Tomlin. He was probably still chewing bubble gum.
Yeah.
Danny Smith was probably under the mask.
Yeah, a bubble popped and blanked his vision.
So what year did you start into the commercial real estate?
It was about 12, 13 years ago. I started into that. I had my license for about 5 to 7 years before that because I knew I wanted to do something different. And it takes, and my boss, now partner, told me this, it takes at least 3 years to start making a living, in that. And it was almost to the day, not quite 3, but he said 2 to 3 years. It was definitely 2 years before there was that, and during that time, you feel a little bit like I'm not contributing. You've got this group of people in office cubes, and they're all on the phone, they're all doing stuff and making deals. Hey, I'll be back this way, and I'll be back in an hour. I got a showing, and what did I find on Facebook? I found a building for sale in Homestead on Craigslist. That was my source because you have to wait, and the difference between going with like a small shop, we're fairly small shop, but like a Howard Hanna who wasn't into commercial, but let's say Oxford or any of these people, they have a network, a national network, or where they can get inquiries. Philadelphia office, gets a call. Hey, we're opening an office in Pittsburgh. Can you get somebody to help us? Well, of course they call Pittsburgh, but the pie, as something happens and you get paid, your piece of the pie gets a little smaller, but you get, you get the referral. You get the inquiries, and so that's why it takes a lot longer the other way. But it's so much more independent and so less strict as far as, I don't want to say following rules because everybody follows the same rules or should, but it's more, a lot of people have developed with the new realtor laws for residential realtors, all of the new, that was like a week seminar for a lot of these residential realtors. I talked to Jill and she said, Ray, it's crazy what you have to do. If you come in the door, and I know you've got real estate thing on your sign out there, so I know you're familiar. But you walk in the door, and I'm running the phones. I have to ask you some question like, are you being represented by another realtor? Before we can even have some kind of conversation. Right. It seems like, it's gone the other way. It's gone overbearing, and then. Signing during COVID, Jesus, we were signing. It got so tedious, and we just had a young guy from another real estate company say, I couldn't take it anymore, and he joined us, but, he's probably 5 years younger than me, so we're looking for younger people to join our group. And
I think that's one of the things, like when I never really you think, oh, it's like just buying a house. When you're in commercial real estate, it's just more zeros, bigger property. But I think and then people also see the number and they think the commissions and, oh, this got to be like the greatest job ever. But I think there was a period of time where you had a building listed at Waynesburg, and I think I talked to you like once a week at that time, and you were like, I'm driving to Waynesburg again, and that might still be on the market down there. So
Yes.
walk us through like a day in the life of working in commercial real estate a little bit.
I mean, like any sales job, you have its percentages. You keep going, but as you get more interested and you actually, if you have a local client or somebody that calls you or you meet, and probably if I was going to recommend to a young person, I would say, see if they'll let you meet them at their office so they can show you what they do and then what their needs are. And the more you have the knowledge of that, the less work you have to do, because you can eliminate a lot of things when you're looking at a large database of available spaces. And one of the biggest things right now is location. Not like I want to be in a Mount Lebanon or Fox Chapel school district, but location, just because they don't want to lose the employees they already have.
Right.
And that's a major thing for guys I've been working with in Sharpsburg. And I always tell Keith, this fellow, I said, you're my oldest client that I've never sold anything to you. I said, I've been talking to you for 12 years.
Yeah.
And
we went through the process together when I was looking for a building. We looked at some gems and some not so gems. And I mean, me and Ray are similar. We have these we look at the world through rose-colored glasses. We're like, we could build this and make this work. And
they're rose-colored, but they're bent a little bit.
Yeah. And, but no, we landed on a nice little building where we're at. And that whole deal worked out. And, but yeah, we did look at a lot of different things.
It's hard. It takes a long time. Commercial real estate's tough. What made you decide to go commercial instead of residential? Was there ever did you ever just think about
I'll be honest with you,
residential?
I always thought, and I did this back in 75. That's a long time ago. But anyway, in 1975, I bought a house on the corner of Fox Chapel and Guys Run Road, not too far from here, and for $26,000. And it was about 3/4 of an acre right on the corner. And my cousin and I bought it. We were all excited. We were going to fix it up and sell it and make money. We were flippers before there were flippers, I guess. And it took us 4 years, and a refrigerator with a hole drilled through it with a tap coming out of it of beer. And we built a 2-car garage there, and we redid the house. But we sold it, and over 4 years, we sold it for like $90,000. And we thought we were so bright. And then, so I bought my next house figuring, I'm on a roll here. And I lost I lost $15,000 on that one. Oh, so
that soured your stomach, the real estate.
Yeah, well, but the residential side, it's just so much competition there. And there's so many part-timers. This is a hobby for me. If you look on the line, there's a gazillion, real estate people, but they're all doing it. Not all of them.
Yeah,
there's
it's not their
wonderful professional real estate.
Yeah, that's not their primary source of income.
It's not. Some of them it's not, but other. Well, I'll tell you. In commercial, I had that experience a little bit, with in the steel mill business, and knowing what the markets were there, and knowing that if you buy a house or if you sell a house, I knew that, the likelihood of you being the seller, if you're the lister and the seller, you used to get half the money. But except, who was it? Multi-list got like a little
percentage.
They threw a multi-list a bone, and then they would split up between the agency and whoever brokers were involved. And by the time you got to the bottom, unless you're doing some, $1 million homes, there's not a whole lot of money left there if you're doing it for, your full-time living.
Yeah, and you figure, when you got into it 20 years ago, the homes weren't what they're worth now either.
No,
so,
like two years ago,
yeah.
I could say, I can't believe what the market.
How many, $50,000 to $100,000 homes were sold 20 years ago? It was a lot,
How many are now?
There's
450 for a ranch.
Yep.
Yeah, there's one in Gibsonia I just saw listed as $3 million. Like, who would have thought Pittsburgh would have had a $3 million listing? But they're there. In Wexford, they're there. Oakmont's got $1 million listings. So it's changed a lot, but the commercial side, like you said, it seemed like it was your niche. Like,
yeah, I just felt like I could, with a little vision, hard things to see when if you're an investor, you've got your idea in your mind, and I would recommend you get an accountant and an architect and an attorney to look closely at this, and your local code enforcement fix, because you don't know what they're going to say when I bought we bought the Blawnox plant down there, and we were so excited when we bought that. We were in Elwood City because we had already bought that one, and I lived like a mile and a half away from Blawnox, but I was driving 35 miles to Elwood City every day and back. So when we bought Blawnox, it was like, oh my God, I got a vacation. I got 2 extra hours to kill every day. But we were so excited. I'll just tell you. And then I got a call from a local councilman here, and he actually worked for the county. He worked for Tom Forrester years ago. That's an old name in politics in Pittsburgh, but he was an aide to Forrester, and he was a council on Blawnox Council. And he called me. He said, "Ray, I got to tell you, this whole city, the town of Blawnox, or at least the people in politics there, were up in arms because I bought this plant. They wanted to see it, torn down and made into housing or whatever." And so they're coming down. He says that they want to come down and visit you tonight. I said, "Oh, okay, what time?" Well, around 6. So I go down to the office in Blawnox, and the guy comes in carrying the mayor, and they're carrying the code enforcement book, whatever that code, the Boca Code book. And he says, "Well, we really can't let you move in here until you bring this whole plan up to the Boca codes." And I'm like, what? And they had changed and had a third party. Indiana Township, do they have a third party here? I believe they do for zoning or occupancy, that sort of thing. So I had the lady that ran Code Sys at the time. I can't remember her name. That's probably better. Anyway,
we know it was you.
But she said it was that I needed to put a sprinkler system inside this 500,000 square foot building that cranes run over.
Yeah.
And I said,
not feasible.
I said, well, think about this. The ceilings are 30, 40 feet high. Time the fire gets up there to set off the sprinklers, it's going to vaporize. The water's just going to turn to steam. And she says, well, put them lower. And I said, well, how are the cranes going to go up and down the runway? So we had to get somebody with, that could look outside the book and say, this isn't the type of building that should need, you can't
just go standard
thing. And the fire chief had to sign off on it. George had to sign off that they could not. I didn't have to put these things in. It was crazy, but those are the kind of things any building that you're going to look at now. Well, yours is a prime example. Yeah. You started out gung ho, excited, and they come and get you.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the, we really don't go by the book with questions here, as you can see, but one of the questions that was populated, it said, like, what should small business owners, look at? And that's exactly what we were talking about, unforeseen cost. I mean, you might as well, if you have a budget, say it's going to be $50,000 a move, just double it. I think in principle, it's just and if you get out at 100, you're happy.
That's for non-planners. If you get the right people and you come in, you can get closer than we obviously did, because when you looked at your building, it was gorgeous but as soon as you change that little word use, the change of use, and it affects everything.
And the DIYer in me thought I should be able to do a lot of that, and then they're telling me, no, you're not allowed to do it. That's what really hands me up, because I've seen what I paid for what they did, and I'm like, I could have done that in a Saturday and not have disturbed anything. like I would have been done faster than the plumber was done, and but that's part of it. So I guess like to anybody listening that's thinking like, I'll just open a flower shop here, well, you got to think about like your coolers and your power and where the plugs are, because you can't just go wiring buildings and putting in sinks wherever you want in commercial space. It's different.
It's different, and checking for 3-phase if you need it, checking for, what's the lighting source? Is there any asbestos in this building? It's affects buildings after a certain time. But in a lot of these places, you don't know when these buildings were built. There's no drawings, but asbestos has been pretty much the biggest issue that's been out there. You're involved in it in one way or another. But, in these old buildings, mostly it's the non-friable, floor tile, 8x8 floor tile. It's pretty much all asbestos. And then I guess there was some adhesive that they used to glue those old ceiling tiles when they used to just glue them up before they suspended them. And that had asbestos in it. But I mean, how much?
Yeah.
What, are you going to go up and start chewing on it? I don't know.
Yeah, if you just leave it go, it's fine. But
I mean, I know there's ways to
encapsulate it. We don't like to promote those ways. We like for them to come in with air scrubbers and ventilation. We like ductwork.
Hazmat suits.
You want them to use ductwork.
Yeah, professionals should run ductwork in figure eights so that you have to use more.
Thank you for listening. And now a brief word from our sponsor. You've got a full plate. Kids, meetings, workouts, side hustles. There's better things to do than laundry. Introducing Wash, laundry reimagined for the modern world. Schedule your pickup in seconds via the convenient web app. Wash picks up your clothes, cleans with care, and brings them back fresh and ready to wear. But it's more than garments. From bedding and table linens to shoes, hats, purses, and more. Wash handles all your life's fabric, leaving you more time to do you. Visit pickupwashdeliver.com and see how convenient it can be to do the wash. And now, back to the show.
How long have you been doing this? 80 shows?
This is our 80th episode.
Every week for 80 episodes.
Yeah, every week. That was one of the things like we were talking earlier about. If you're ever on like this endeavor to like, I wanted to start a podcast, don't start it in your garage by yourself. A lot of podcasts make it 5 episodes because like there's always going to be something. And I think Jerry's wife and Sarah would agree that when we're holding each other accountable, like it's easier to say to your wife, hey, we got this thing, we set a date, we're going to do this date, and like we hold each other accountable, so.
You keep this little thing with the booze and all this stuff in here
that's
all to
all
yourself,
tea.
so the ladies think, wow, they're working
He collected
over there.
all these empty bottles and filled them with tea.
Yeah, it's all iced tea, but
We have had Icy Light on every episode, 80 episodes, and we're still waiting to see if Cliff Forrester, Iron City, wants to send a representative.
Come
down.
on, Cliff.
yeah.
Well, just talking, I was telling Joe that, and I mentioned it to my partner, one partner, who was not, he told me have fun. That was his comment. But I said, I don't know if there's a market. These shows on Sundays, I don't watch them anymore, but I used to watch them religiously, all the real estate shows, because it was interesting to me, made you feel like, what's my property worth? I know you'd look at it.
I forgot about that. They used to just show on Channel 3, they would just, Howard Hanna
Stuff
would
on
just,
the market,
Remax. I remember those shows, yeah.
I loved it. And, I don't know that that's the type of podcast that we could get going. I'm talking about a commercial real estate type podcast separately, but
yeah, because with the commercial property, the numbers are so big when they sell them. Like you could probably sit down and talk about the potential. Like this could be, So I mean, it is something that.
But in Lawrenceville, for example, that was an area that took a long time to trend over to.
Yeah.
Now it's become a place where you want to be.
Yeah, that's in our questions here. What's the next Lawrenceville? That's what everybody in real estate wants to know.
Well, I don't know. I would think Millvale. I think Etna, Millvale. If you come up the river, Sharpsburg, you're gonna have, a real transition in those neighborhoods, not only from I think just from a standpoint of investment, you know how much investment went on in Sharpsburg when they announced they were doing this
park
down there. And, you know, I had talked to Ascon about that property for UPMC at the time when I worked at UPMC. I didn't get into I skipped over the whole UPMC.
Those were the dark years.
Yeah, dark, you know. Other than the few brain surgeries that I did participate in. But no, that was a long project. And if you're going to invest money, you know, the people that bought that property, that money's been sitting there and they're paying taxes and they tore down everything that was there.
See, that's the thing, and it happens in every industry, but everybody now wants to look at Lawrenceville like everybody there got rich quick. Mm-hmm. And what's the next Lawrenceville? Because they want to put their money somewhere so they can get rich quick. But what they fail to realize is that the people that got rich in Lawrenceville bought those places in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and they paid $30,000 for them. And yes, they're worth $300 now. But they've owned them for decades, half a century or more. So yes, they got rich, but it wasn't quick.
No.
And you can get rich in Millvale, in Etna, in Sharpsburg, in Verona. But it's going to take a minute.
Yeah.
But those people in Lawrenceville, nothing was quick. Mm-mm. And the people that bought 20 years ago in Lawrenceville didn't get rich. They bought halfway up. You know, it was a long process.
Not only that, but they were buying, this was where they were going to live. This wasn't some sort of an investment.
They lived there.
They lived there, they worked there probably.
Or they bought rentals and they dealt with headaches for 50 years.
I know a guy, he was actually owner of Wiley Holdings, Joseph Edelstein, and he told me, he was like, I could have wrote a book exactly how to make money in Lawrenceville, and he goes, 99.9% of the people wouldn't have been willing to follow the plan, because he said like he had like a rental property that he actually I think lived there for a little bit, but there was like no windows. Like he struggled to, but like he kept buying. No matter what it cost, he just kept buying.
It was just a neighborhood that people invested in.
Right.
It wasn't anything fancy. Nobody bought in Lawrenceville like, I'm going to get rich quick in Lawrenceville. It just happened.
Yeah, he had a funny story where he said like the first year he was there, he put flower pots out and they lasted like 4 hours. Someone smashed them, took all the flowers and they were ruined. The next year he put them out, it was like 4 days. He said like 5 years later, they lasted like a month. And he goes, 15 years later, they lasted all summer. He was like, because there was still like all kind of problems down there. I mean, you were taking your life in your own hands driving through them. We were teenagers.
Yeah.
So like that was a rule. If I was going to a Penguin game or downtown, we weren't go 28. You weren't allowed.
I remember in my 20s driving through there on my way home from a Penguin game or a concert or something in my mom's Trailblazer and getting egged.
That's when it was starting to transition.
Yeah.
10 years before that, you'd have got shot.
Yeah.
Now that eggs are $9 a dozen.
Yeah, they don't throw eggs anymore.
Yeah, someone's house get eggs now. They deserve
now
it.
9mm are cheaper. They just shoot.
You just shoot you, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody's always going to ask that question.
Everybody always asks that, but you hit the nail on the head. It wasn't a get rich quick. This was a long process of converting Lawrenceville into the mecca that it is now.
The people that had money bought, but I'll give you a really quick story that, you know, because of my ADD might take a little longer, but the fella called me because he saw my sign. I had this building for sale, and he saw my sign, and he was an immigrant, an Italian immigrant, had been here since he was 16 years old. He was in his late 80s, and he had worked the same job for 50 years on that same street that he saw my sign on, and he had, over the years, with cash, purchased 5 properties on Melwood Avenue in Shadyside. And he just called me up, and he said, "Can you help me?" And I sent him a nice little... Pardon me?
To sell them, or is he trying to buy
sell
them?
Yeah. Can you, he says, "I think I'm ready to sell." And he cut all the grass himself. He did everything for all those properties. And he was renting them. And people would leave his rent under a brick. here and there. He would go to collect it. I meant to meet him, and he goes, oh, look, rent, and he's showing me this stuff. And there were garages up in the alley up above. He had those rented out. So he wasn't making a ton of money, but, he was still getting probably $3,000-$4,000 a month, in cash. But such a nice guy. I turned him over to a friend, and she got him over $1 million for that. I thought he was going to cry. He took us to dinner, and he had another piece down there, and we got him $450 for that. So he ended up with $1.5 million for properties. And came when he was 16. His uncle or cousin that worked at this place said, "Here, you come here." He didn't speak English, and he worked in the same factory, learned a skill first of all, and then worked there and bought those places up. And that's a wonderful story for a guy. But like you said, it didn't happen overnight.
No, and so many people look at that guy and like, look how lucky he is. And it's like,
he's 87.
He couldn't spend it all. But I think as small business owners, and we talk about this a lot, like what we did when he bought this building and I bought my building, that is your kind of end game. Like we don't invest in a 401k.
That was my end game when I had all that property.
Yeah.
And that was my 401k. We had a huge amount of, 700,000 square feet in rentals, and I left that. It's not that I was a total idiot to walk away from that and sell my part, but my dad was retiring, and so he and I left. My brother-in-law, he bought us out, and we were going to buy about 900,000 square feet in Lindora, right across from Butler. Was the old Pullman plant, but it became Trinity Industries, and they were still building rail cars there. And 900,000 square feet. There was about 60 cranes in there and scrap. And we were so excited about doing this. We had it under agreement. And a bank, after they had lent us money for Elwood and lent us money for Plunux and all these other projects, they wouldn't lend my dad and I the money for that.
Ouch.
And we were, I tried a lot of different ways. Didn't try hard enough. Should have tried harder. But when you had that, now it's a 1031 exchange thing. What are you going to do with this cash you got? I'm going to stick it into there and, save some, not save, but delay.
Yeah, defer some tax.
Defer some tax, yeah.
Defer.
Kick
the can.
So
in the time that you've been selling commercial real estate, what's the biggest deal you've ever done?
Well, biggest deal was with Aerotech up in the RIDC Park. They're a motion company. They build very precise motion equipment. And I had been approached by them to I think my name was up on a building or something, and they called me, and we went and looked at some property, and they leased. I got this big lease from them for all this property on Alpha Drive, and they were going to do this and do that. They gutted the whole thing, and then a building came up for sale just up the street. And, it was an old, I think it was a General Electric building up in RIDC that was built during the energy crisis, and it was all electric heat. The whole entire, I don't know how many square feet, must have been 100,000 square feet, but it was 3 stories and all electric heat. And it was, because it was for sale years and years ago. And who were the people? Walnut Capital. Maybe. They bought it, and they had a long-term lease with GE in there for a long, long time. And then GE finally left. But anyway, somebody calls me and tells me about this building. I tell Aerotech, and Aerotech says, let's go look at it. And, it ended up being perfect for them. So it was like a $4 million or something like that. And, but it was a little nerve-wracking for me because I had never been involved in something that big, and it hadn't been more than 5 years into my tenure. And your first impulse is to try to grab your partner or your boss and say, hey, come in here and help me with this. But you just have to get over those hurdles. But there's been crazy deals we had a deal with this company from Ohio, and the owners live in Israel. Nice people. They were from Squirrel Hill and Fox Chapel, and the gal I met, she lived in the roundhouse. There was actually a roundhouse they call it Pill Hill, right off of Delafield.
Okay.
Pill Hill, there's a roundhouse. She lived it there. Anyway, nice lady. They asked me to do some work for them for a company, and they gave me a listing, like 40,000 square feet of beautiful space for lease in the RIDC lab, whole 9 yards, and it was for, this is going to be a high-tech company. Well, we list it, we get it all done, have signs up, we go to the first inspection, and it's with a guy, the company that was leaving and saying, we want to sublease our space. They hired a real estate agent. So I'm working for the owner. They hire a real estate agent to sublet their space.
Yeah.
And it ends up like a cluster for 6 months.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I get a call from the guy. He says, hey, we're about to close on that, lease up there. So I'm saying, we didn't do anything. But we were the listing agent. And, they have to pay us $66,000. 33 up front, which they paid. And 33 we deferred till 2028. But you don't even, those are the weirdest deals. You didn't do anything. It was a confusion between the owner and who's going to do what, and then everybody gets together and forgets about me.
Well,
that's a nice
get
deal.
a couple more of them deals.
Yeah. Well, it happens.
Yeah, I think taking that, getting that first deal is important in anything, because you're like, you prove it to yourself. I can do this. I got this.
What do you think is going to happen with RIDC Park now that Giant Eagle left up there?
Are they all the way gone now?
Yeah, I think that they are. And it seems like there's a lot of businesses leaving. When I was shopping for this building, I saw that there was some vacancies up there. So I went up, there was a building up there that I saw online. And I thought, it might not be a bad fit for me. And then I went up there and it was too big for me. So I thought, well, I'll get it and then I'll sublease it, right? Or I'll lease out the space. And then I went up there and I'm like, there is literally a for lease sign in front of every goddamn building up here.
You're right.
I can't buy a building planning to lease the space because there's too much competition for leased space up here. Yeah. So it made me too nervous to take that on. What the hell's going on up there?
Well, RIDC, they're the biggest entity around here that does that. It makes it difficult for, if I wanted to take Blawnox, for example, when we bought that and do something that was similar, they have such rules about what you can build up there and what has to be on it. It has to be brick. You can't put a metal face on a building. We went up there and looked when it was originally going to be built, and we went up there and looked to build a building up there, and just with the cost of brick and that sort of type building at the time. But I really think that with Emerson going out, there's 3 buildings, I think, with Emerson. The building that I believe the Hubble telescope was built in up there, which is now called L3, but I think it was called Contravis or I think it was Contravis that built the Hubble scope up there. That whole building's, they're trying to auction it now.
Okay. Zoll left up there.
Well, they added space. They're
Zoll's
still
everywhere. Yeah.
Oh, Zoll's still up there?
Yeah, they've just added distribution spaces amongst Pittsburgh here.
They have 2 buildings here. They have a building now.
They took over the MSA.
On Alpha Drive?
They took over the MSA building, which was kind of, I remember my aunt worked there, and the whole middle of the building is just plants.
Oh, that was, Zoll took that?
They're in there, yeah. That's where Sarah worked for a while.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then, but they rent another building up there from somebody else where Sarah used to have to take a bus. In the back
corner, yeah.
Right. And then they also have a place.
And they just bought Ladbrokes building. They're down in Ladbrokes.
Did they buy that?
Yeah, and
They're down there. I don't know if they bought it.
Yeah, and they're on 910 also. They have a distribution on 910
Right.
here.
Real close to here.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I don't know if it was a Pittsburgh-based company, but they've...
But I'll tell you what's interesting, about RIDC. And right now, most of those spaces were designed, most of those buildings were designed in the 70s, later, and they were given massive office, even though it had a I think there's a 40 or 50,000 square foot building up there for sale at, I think it's 640 Alpha. And I don't know who was in there before. It's a huge building, but they must have 15,000 square feet of office in the front. And unless the prices could come down to a point where you could say, I'm going to bulldoze this portion in the front and put, loading docks or something that makes more sense for this market, because it's really distribution, and people want loading docks. They want clean space, insulated, and further out 910. I'm sure you've been out there before the wine place or right after the wine. Yep. Coco's property out there. They've got a little self-storage area there. Yep. And then in front of that, we went to these people a long time ago. Somebody wanted to buy the piece of land and build a building, and they said, we'll just lease it and build it and ground lease it to you. So you don't own the building, but they'd own the land. And they finally sold it to whoever built that distribution center out there. I don't even know if it's filled quite yet.
In this day and age, I mean, a lot of people work from home. You don't need you don't need these big data servers, and you don't need pencil pushers all over the place.
Some people do. Don't say pencil pusher around your accountant, for Christ's sake. No, but
he's been called worse. Believe me. Leave that in, Nate.
Today,
I use a pen. I don't even have an eraser. But that's where I see is these buildings are going to have to either be torn down and rethought, and mostly the RIDC owns a lot of the buildings up there. Okay. The one that you looked at, where was it? Right on Alpha as you're going up?
Right as you're going up to the right. It's 2-story, but the second story is ground level in the front, and then you go around the back. There's parking in the back. Goes in a bit. You know what I'm talking about.
I think Prudential or David Hanley had that for sale.
Yep. Yeah, it was I think it was in the 900 range, 975, something like that. So it was a little bigger than what I needed. I could have grown into it. It was more than I wanted to spend, but I thought, well, for the time being, I could lease out the bottom floor.
Yeah,
had its own parking in the back. I could make it work. But then I took a ride up there, and I'm like, look at all these for lease signs. Mm-hmm. Everything is for lease. How could I possibly rely on the fact that I could lease this space out when everybody else is also leasing space out?
It's tough. That whole corner at Alpha, and I don't know if that's not Beta, Alpha, and whatever. It says townhouses for industry. It's the corner that goes like this at Alpha, and there are a whole bunch of little buildings that are like condos that are connected, and behind them they have 1 or 2 loading docks.
Okay.
No drive-ins. Little office in the front with the loading docks. They want $14 and some cents a square foot for those. And some of them have 5,000 square feet of office and 2,000 of warehouse, and it's just not going to cut it. So what they really need is to relook at it, because they're building. RIDC bought the park up it's called Innovation Ridge, I think, at the Slate Lick exit.
Okay.
Or Bird's Foot exit.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they took that over, and I sold a building up there to a commercial roofing company that he's happy to be up there because, whatever RIDC does, they're doing first class.
Right.
It's a lot different than they started in the 70s.
They owned Edgewater at one point in Oakmont, RIDC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, before it went residential. I guess they were going to do something there.
Do you think that there's a possibility that could end up ever getting sold off and ending up going residential in that area? Because it is valuable ground. I mean, it is still Fox Chapel.
Cool.
Right. Fox Chapel School District.
Yeah.
I mean,
O'Hare
28
Township really got a deal on that.
28 cuts right through it, which that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is still Fox Chapel School District, which we know that those parcels go for a lot of money.
I mean, look what they did in Upper Blawnock. So they built like 7 houses, and there's
a lot of acreage up
even
there.
where Lynn and
Your sister lives
yeah, my sister Lynn moved up there.
And there's a lot of acreage up there. You could put a lot of houses on that land.
Well, you could access that land from Rockport Drive too, if you go past. It's the only right-hand turn when you're going on Fox Chapel Road, and you pass the O'Hare Township, and you pass the park on the
That
right.
would get you on the
keep
upper
going.
side.
There's a road that turns to the right and goes up.
Into RDC Park.
It goes into a whole plan up there. I don't know what they call it, but I thought it was Rockwell Drive or Rockport.
They would be real thrilled if they just added
But-
350 homes on the back.
Well, that's what I mean, but otherwise now, no, you'd have exits to get off there, but a lot of people, when you're buying $1 million or $2 million home, you don't want it right off the freeway.
Right.
You want to have a little, You think about, I thought about this when I look at RIDC. You ever been to First Watch?
Which one?
Well, the one that I wanted to put where that stupid periwinkle is up there. Yeah. I thought that would have been a great
It would have been.
place, and it's for lease.
Don't they have a stipulation up there? There was like restaurant limitations. You're only allowed to have. There's only like one restaurant. When Max and Irma's went in, they had a limitation.
Yeah, they were really shitty. They've changed a lot of rules up there. There was no doctor's offices allowed up there initially. There was none of that.
So that doctor's office actually closed because that was my kid's pediatrician's office. I think that closed.
They moved.
They moved, right?
Yeah, they're in the back of RIDC now, closer to Giant Eagle.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Where was that one?
That was down by Howard Hanna. You go up, make a left, go up through. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. What's his name? He was in there, but also
Dr.
they had
Tucker.
a gym in there, and they had a
I can't think of my kid's doctor's name.
Lou Martone had a.
Our doctor was actually Sarah's doctor when she was a kid, and I don't remember, but maybe you do, and you'll get dad points for it. But she then retired. But when they closed that office, they moved to the back of RDC Park.
Okay.
So you just keep going straight out.
You
and
can see how long it's been.
That building is a
My wife handles that.
community
split
pediatrics.
level.
Yeah.
That building's a split level too. Because you entered on the high side or you entered on the low side for that building. Yeah, it's right past Hannah's.
Now they're back by Macera. Macera's been a long stay up there.
There was another building going up Alpha to.
I don't know, but RIDC, you better sponsor this show.
Well, it was for sale for a long time.
But that was also part of my concern too, is that if I were to go up there and buy a building, and then all of a sudden 3 years, 5 years from now, they decide,
Yeah.
we're
If
going
you
to
bought
convert this to
it and
residential.
took the office and then there was warehouse space behind it, that would have been fine because you can always find somebody that needs to put something in there.
Right.
And if you're there, the neighbor up here who used to be in Verona, your neighbor Tuminello, Lou up
I know
here.
Lou.
Yeah.
Oh, CXL.
CXL.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's an amazing spot. And he had some nice office space in there that he wanted me to try to rent. And, it
In
just
Verona or here?
right here.
Yeah, I've not been back that road. I don't know what's all back there.
A lot
Yeah.
more than I originally. Actually, if you go up that road all the way to the top, it hits Indianola Road.
Right.
And that's probably, as the crow flies, the fastest way to get home from
There's
here.
a few newer residential homes up there. I mean, in the last 15 years. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a whole plan. Blue Run Road. Or
Blue Run, yeah, you got
Is
it.
that called?
Yep, you
Blue
got
Run.
it.
Yeah, they put it was at the end. And a little precarious drive down there, but once you got down to the bottom.
See, and that's what drew me to this property. This property that I purchased has 2 lots, so I have some space to the right of this building. It goes down over the hillside, but there's some space here. This lot to the left here is owned by somebody else. Like right after the parking lot, that parcel goes all the way to the bridge. Which eventually, once I'm ready, I'm going to try to find that guy and try to buy that. But so I have some room to grow here. But this worked out really well for me. I like it.
I mean, it's a great building. Quiet, too. I wouldn't have thought it was this quiet.
Yeah.
Unless you put some insulation.
Yeah, occasionally you'll hear a truck go by because the turnpike's right behind you.
Yeah, and 910's over there, but I don't hear anything.
And we've talked about it, but like going north, I would assume, like north on 910, it seems like they're just building and building and building. Yeah. So you got a lot more traffic.
There's a lot of development on this road.
Well, as you start, even just talking about real estate in general, our office is in Mars, actually, is where the 4 Points or 5 Points Hilton or whatever they call it out there, Cranberry. That's actually a Mars, PA address. So, but even when you go out there and everybody's saying, I just want to get it into the Butler school taxes, I don't want to be hit with these taxes. But what are they going to do? With all that growth that they had, and there's going to be need for schools, need for more sewage, more capacity of everything.
I think Butler's probably going to end up raising taxes at some point. These are the people around. I mean, I think Westmoreland County already kind of starting to rebound a little bit, starting to catch up. I think the one thing that these other counties have over Allegheny County, though, which is the stuff that you went through, is Allegheny County makes you jump through some crazy ass hoops.
Yeah, and then they also got the city of Pittsburgh bearing down on us financially.
Well, it'd be great if the county and city would
just
merge someday.
just merge.
And save us a ton of taxpayers a lot of money. But yeah, once you get into the city, there's an extra tax.
Yeah.
Katie ran the staffing agency for a long time, and anybody that she placed to work in the city of Pittsburgh, there was something called a Pittsburgh expense tax. It's not a big deal. But, anywhere in Allegheny County are an extra 1%.
Yep.
Right.
You wonder why people are moving, moving out this way. It's land value. Every time you get closer to Pittsburgh, you could.
It does. Yeah.
This building was sitting in, wherever it would be worth, whatever, it's just.
Yeah, it's nice to be this building here. Same with my building in Cheswick. It's close to a corridor. You can get on 28 and go. I mean, I can be on the turnpike in a minute.
It's an ideal. I mean, we owned all of the Allegheny Steel buildings down there, that the original Allegheny Steel building and the schoolhouse and we owned all of those buildings down there.
And you can just get right on 28 and go.
Well, when you ask why the steel business went to shit in Pittsburgh, during the Carter administration, 18 to 20% was your borrowing rate. That was you want to go get a line of credit to go borrow something, you were at,
People cry the blues now at
20% at the time, and we owed a lot of money. I mean, it's a scary time, but that's when people started to say, hey, businesses went out, I can't cut it. I knew it affected this whole economy,
Well, you're even seeing that now at 8%. I've been buying rental properties over the last several years with the rates being low, but now that you're paying 7-8% for a loan on a piece of rental property, all of a sudden that spread's not there. Mm-hmm. You're not making much money every month whenever you've got to pay a mortgage at 7-8%.
What's the residential? Is it in the 6s? 5s?
If you're buying for your house, you can be in the low 6s. I'm actually just about to close on. I just sold a house in March, and I think they were in like 6.1, and I'm closing on one. Supposed to be tomorrow, but it got delayed because the bank's not ready. And I think they're in the low 6s.
It's going to be a rental. Or
I'm selling two existing rentals that I've decided to sell off. But when you're buying,
so you're saying the buyers are going to be in the 6s.
Yeah, the buyers are going to be in the 6s. But I've been buying in the last several years. But I've been buying in the high 4s, low 5s. When you're doing that, and the way the rental revenue market has been there's been a decent amount of spread there. You can make a decent profit. But right now, because people are tight, people are pinching pennies, and the amount of money I can charge for rent, I feel like that spread's getting smaller when I've got to pay mortgage at 7.5% rate. It's tough to make money every month, especially, I'm still looking for multifamilies because a multifamily makes it a little bit easier to cash flow. Definitely easier to cash flow. But on a single family house, if you're making $200 a month, $300 a month, you have somebody who lives there for 1 year and you've got to repaint the place, forget it. You've just lost your entire profit for the entire year just painting it. Because these contractors, a painter's going to cost you $3,000 minimum to paint the house inside. So it's been, these rates, they changed the game. So I can't imagine 18, 20%.
You're young enough that you're not starting like the sick people in the 60s in Lawrenceville, but you're young enough that, I'll
get through it.
You'll withstand all of that.
Yeah, and I'm still looking, and I'm like I said, I've just kind of changed the strategy a little bit, right? So I'm not buying everything I can find. I'm my plan is that I'm gonna buy single families to flip them, and I'm gonna buy multis to hold them, and because the multifamilies I can still make a profit on them, still cash flow with it. But it's been, these rates have changed the game.
I saw a house for sale when I was just goofing around looking at the thing. It's in Harmer, and you probably know about this, but I think the land that all those houses are on across from like Target and all those places.
The Denny camps.
Somebody told me that they were like squatters, that they didn't really own the land. The land may be owned by the railroad. It's a whole.
No, it's a weird concept because we looked at, they had a house right on the river there. So you essentially are paying a lease on the land. It's like kind of like that deal you said before. You own the structure, but the land is leased. I don't know who owns it. They used to call them the Denny
It was
camps.
$60,000. It's a house on the river. I thought, well, here's a good number.
Yeah,
on the river.
I remember years ago, I was like, oh, this is cool. It had a dock. It was an A-frame. I was like, this would be a great camp. It's close to home. And then you go down there and you start driving around and you're like, oh, I'd have to sell drugs to fit in down here. Like I would have to either kill someone to prove my stay or sell drugs to make it work because it was kind of shady.
I call that area down there, where I call it the poop plant. Where the poop plant is. You can't miss it.
Yeah.
Everybody says, oh, that's a chemical they put in there to make it. I said, well, why don't they put in a better chemical?
If that was a private-owned business, they'd have them shut down and boarded up.
So the guy who I met, he was from Oakmont or Verona, I can't remember. It was a long time ago. He approached me. Kratz's owned that piece of land right next to the poop plant.
Yeah.
Right after
it was on both sides of the
inlet,
road.
on the inlets here and the poop plants on one side, and then that inlet that goes back.
Yeah.
Well, Kratz's owned that property, and I sold it to the people that own that island, or all the residents.
Yeah,
they have like a club or
it's a corporation.
A corp, some kind of beach club or something they call it.
Yep.
And
I did taxes for a guy that has a house on that island, and I didn't know anything about that island until he explained that to me. But to buy into that island, you don't own the property. You're buying into this. You're a shareholder in this corporation, and you have to be approved by the current shareholders to be an owner. But you're buying shares, and you get the house.
And how do they get rid of sewage out there?
I'm not sure.
Well, septic.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, but once it gets through there, once it gets through that land.
Yeah, did they? They probably wanted it for parking then.
That's all they wanted it for, was for parking. And Kratza was, it took a while to get for him to do it. But yeah.
Those are the fun things you see in commercial real estate. You get to see someone's brainchild start to cook at the beginning. They're like, I want to do this, and start coming to you with their business idea. And it might be something brand new. That's kind of cool.
Well, so many people started with this idea of a pickleball. Let's do pickleball. and they wanted to, but the best type of building for pickleball would be an old industrial building because the ceilings are high.
Wide span.
If you can clean it, they're wide span, and you can put,
Might be a
50
warehouse
courts up.
space in Verona. Might be a good spot for that.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Well, do you have any other questions? Because we got rapid fire questions.
Fire off the rapid fire.
I'll go the rapid fire. This is
We going 1 and 1. This is you got to get ready. These are intense.
okay.
You can start us off. We'll hand them back and
All right.
forth.
What's your go-to club under pressure?
8-iron.
That shows your age there.
Yes.
Craziest thing you've ever seen doing a property tour?
Get back to that one. I know I have one.
What's a course you haven't played yet, but it's on your bucket list?
Allegheny.
Allegheny Country Club?
Yeah, never played there.
We should have printed 2 sheets of this.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to need cheaters soon. My arms are getting long. More birdies or more deals closed last month?
Definitely.
4.
Definitely it would be deals because 1. When you're thinking of birdies,
1 is the magic
one's
number.
probably the number. Yeah.
Office, retail, or industrial, what's the most underrated sector right now?
I would say small industrial. Before you go to this, went to Etna today to look at a building, 5,000 square feet, concrete block. Howard Hanna has it for sale for $325,000. It's been on the market for a week. They have 3 offers. And it's a 5,000 square foot square building, maybe 14 feet ceiling height. The guy had some press brakes in there and some shears and whatnot that he was doing stainless. And $325. When I met the customer I had there yesterday, the realtor told me we have 3 offers in hand, and we're going to do a best in, put your best proposal in, and whoever wins is best man. Put your best proposal in, and 5,000 square feet. So you 325. That's a lot of money for a little building.
That's the market right now. People want that space. Biggest mistake small business owners make when leasing space?
They don't do their homework. They don't.
Why'd you look right at me when you said that?
Well, there are a lot of factors there, but mainly is you got to do your homework. You got to know what you need, what you're leaving, and why you're leaving. I don't have enough space. There's not enough power, whatever it is. But that's where you get screwed up.
Walk or ride on the golf course?
Oh, I'm a rider.
Told you these were easy.
If I could get a ride to the golf cart, I'd take a ride to the golf cart.
What's one Pittsburgh neighborhood you'd invest in today?
I would do Etna or Millvale.
Yeah.
I think those are neighborhoods that are going to grow, in Sharpsburg, of course, and go up the river, Cheswick and Springdale. All of those areas are going to get, because of the value, the price of housing.
Yeah.
And as you're, going up the river, it gets cheaper and cheaper. But, what are you suffering? Well, you're losing. People are married to the Fox Chapel School District. Listen, I graduated from there. It can't be that good.
Yeah.
I'm doing 10, you do 9.
Okay.
One thing about commercial real estate you wish more people would understand?
The process. It's not like buying a house. It's a long process of due diligence, and you're gonna have to spend money to find out if you want to buy that building or not. You're probably gonna have to spend $5,000, $10,000, as you go along, because you're gonna need an architect and a maybe a guy that looks for asbestos and this sort of thing, So that would
Due diligence.
due diligence. Yeah, you gotta do it.
Play golf with one person, dead or alive. Who would it be?
My son-in-law, Joe.
Come on, look at that.
I'd play with Freddie Couples. I like Freddie Couples. You
Fred's
know?
a good dude. He has his own vodka now. I see him out slinging vodka.
Really?
He's really letting his hair down in his older age. Well, then the last question, the bonus question, who's your favorite son-in-law? But he already answered that.
Yeah. No, I'll go back
So you
to
only
the
have
other one.
one?
The funny, I'm trying to think of the...
yeah, you can be honest.
You only have one son-in-law. Is that
Yeah,
Well, technically, I don't have any.
I knew that was
He
coming.
hasn't popped the question. I think
popped the
Sarah
question.
you popped the question. You just haven't answered it yet.
he just put you on
I
blast,
said
bro?
when we were, I forget, one of the first times we golfed together, you said, you are in the will, but it's in pencil.
And I got a bigger issue.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the craziest thing I saw, but I'll have to
Put it in the comments.
I'll put it in an email. Yeah, I'll put it in an email because I've seen some strange things.
You can send them in. We'll put them in the comments.
Top 10.
Top 10. All right. Well, this is great.
This
Thank
is
you
awesome.
guys for-
So if somebody wants to reach out to you to buy or sell a piece of commercial real estate, how do they get in touch? What's your name of your company? How do they get in touch with you?
That's right. You had me here anonymously this whole time. My name's Ray Timmons. You can reach me on my cell phone at 412-638-1681 or at my email address, which is rtimmons, weird spelling, THIMONS, at pencom, that's PENN, COM.com.
Perfect.
Over and out.
Thank you for listening to Between Two Bridges, a business-to-business podcast. Find and follow us on your preferred podcast streaming platform. Like and subscribe, and leave us a rating and review. You can join us socially on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. You can email the show at info@betweentwobridgespodcast.com. Until next time, make it till you rake it.